So let's kick off with Harley-Davidson, who've made a couple of announcements over the past few weeks. The first of which revealed the returning models to their Grand American Touring lineup. So the Street Glide, Road Glide, and Road King Special, and then also some of the Trigs too. So the Road Glide 3, Freewheeler, and the Tri-Glide Ultra. Now mostly they appear to be pretty much the same year on year, but what they did announce for some of these models is a new factory custom paint and graphics program, which basically allows you to get some of the look and feel of a proper custom paint job, but Harley say without the extra price and lead times that can be associated with using a third party. Now, there are 3 on offer, with the first being called Mystic Shift, and they say this one offers a dramatic hue shift which travels from a dark gunmetal to purple to blue to almost orange, and is especially apparent in full sunlight when walking around the motorcycle. The other, though, are variations on their Firestorm finish, with flame details set into the paintwork on the fairing, tank, side panels, and the hard cases. This one references similar schemes from their first factory flame paint on the 1980 Wide Glide model, and also more recent bikes like the 2011 Wide Glide. Now this one also comes in a dark midnight Firestorm variant and also an orangey whiskey Firestorm, and personally I can't really decide on this one. It partly looks a little bit corny, but then again looks totally apt for a Harley too. So let me know what you think of it down in the comments. More recently though, we've had an absolute flurry of 2025 models, all with their own significant upgrades, and so we'll start first with the Cruiser lineup. Now 6 bikes return, so they're Lowrider S, the Lowrider ST, the Breakout, the Heritage Classic, the Fat Boy and the Street Bob, and all of them now get a massively updated tech package. So there's a whole suite of rider aids now, with cornering traction control and cornering ABS, cornering drag torque slip control, cruise control as well, tire pressure monitoring, and pretty much all of those weren't fitted to the previous year model for the Cruiser lineup. Take the Heritage Classic as just one example. That only used to have ABS and that was absolutely it. It's the same for some of the other variations as well. And while on the one hand it's probably time that they caught up technologically with some of the competition, on the other, I did kind of like that you could still buy a properly massive V-twin cruiser and have absolutely no nannying or intervention between you and the power. So look, a change for the better? I'd love to know what you think, again, down in the comments. Other than that, you've got minor tweaks to the way that the bikes look in terms of the finishing and stuff like that. Different finishes on the hardware. The Lowriders, for example, get a 2-into-1 exhaust system instead of 2-into-2, so there's some little changes like that. And also, the switchgear has been updated for better ease of use, and they all come now with USB-C charging. So look, a nice little refresh for these models, if not a groundbreaking overhaul. And what I will say, it's very rare that I'd ever commend Harley on pricing, with a lot of these bikes being, 20 grand or over. But in the current climate, it is fairly refreshing to see a price increment for some of them of just 50 or 60 quid, or maybe like £100. Now next up, there's a new addition to the Grand American Touring lineup, and this one's called the Street Glide Ultra, with the Ultra suffix being used plenty of times in the past, and basically it represents a more comfortable touring focused spec with full luggage as standard. This one is, definitely at the top end of the budget though. It comes in at £28,495 starting price before you've even specced up a fancy paint job. But you do get, for the money, the tall touring windscreen, the comfort seat, the heated grips, the top box with the backrest, the armrests and the luggage rack, and fairing lowers and saddlebag guards and more. Then in the cockpit, like the standard Street Glide, you still get their massive TFT dash. I think they say it's 312 millimeters in diameter, and that comes with their Skyline OS, which personally I really do like. It's one of my favorite operating systems in terms of TFT dashes on the market, and that brings all the connectivity and stuff like that. Through that, and the menus, you also get to manage all of those cornering TC and ABS and drag torque control settings that we mentioned for the Cruiser lineup as well. And then for the engine, well, it's the regular 117 cubic inch version of the M8. So it makes 107 horsepower peak and 175 newton meters of peak torque. And still, that should be enough to get it on the move, although this one probably ain't for the weak of leg at just shy of 400 kilograms in running order. Personally, I actually think this one is a rather handsome looking bike. I really do like the single headlight with the bar mounted fairing, which I think is a bit easier on the eye and probably more broadly palatable than the big wide headlight on the Road Glide. And then with the black hardware, some of the new paint jobs, I do think it all comes together really quite nicely. Now, CVO stands for Custom Vehicle Operations at Harley, and it represents their most high-spec, high-tech, high-finish and high-priced models with a new treatment for specific bikes every year, and they say this is actually their 26th installment now, with updates to the CVO Street Glide, the CVO Road Glide, as well as the more sporty, King of the Baggers inspired Road Glide ST. There are certainly some pretty pop-in paint jobs for this year as well, especially that Road Glide in the blue streak. But I gotta say, the tastiest bike of the bunch has to be that ST model with the carbon bodywork and the wavy disc, the lightweight cast wheels and the black hardware with some little pops of red, all of which do make for a really special looking bike. Don't get too excited though if you like what you see, because all three of those bikes start at over £40,000. This one isn't part of the cruiser lineup or the tourer lineup, but I do have to give a quick mention to the Pan America Adventure bike, which also gets an update to the CVO version for 2025 with a new carbon blue paint job with some camo graphic details. This CVO version comes as standard with full luggage, with crash bars, with auxiliary lights and more. And to be honest, when they announced the first version of this CVO Pan America last year, I was kind of wondering if anyone was actually going to buy one. It was a bike that I didn't really expect to see out in the wild. Fast forward though, a couple of months, and one parked directly next to me at the sort of ticket line for ABR Festival. And I've got to admit, it did really stand out from a crowd of GSs and Teneres and Tigers and stuff like that. I quite like the sort of vibrancy of the finish. Maybe it's something I'd like to see from more adventure bike manufacturers. And so yeah, I'll be very interested to see if I see any of these new 2025 bikes out on the road as well. On top of that though, they've released another Pan America variant, and this one is a new hot ST version, which is entirely road focused and as such gets cast wheels with a smaller 17-inch front. So effectively you can think of this as sort of Harley's answer to the Multistrada V4 Pikes Peak. And again, I'm not sure this is necessarily a bike that anyone's been screaming out for, but then as with the CVO, I've been proven wrong in the past. Last up for Harley though, there's the Sportster S, which I still think is one of the weirdest, coolest, concept-y looking bikes on the market, with that super low slung stance, a bit of a flat track influence with the seat and the pipes, and then this humongous front wheel, which basically makes no sense out on the road, but does look flipping awesome. The main issue though with this bike had to be the suspension, because it had absolutely F-all travel, both front and rear. And so that meant if you hit a pothole or something like that, your spine certainly knew about it in an instant. In fact, I looked up the specs. It had just 92 millimeters of travel on the fork, but then a minuscule 51 millimeters on the shock. And that made it pretty uncomfortable for anything but marble smooth roads. And, this might not be news to anybody, but marble smooth roads aren't something you find a lot of here in the UK. Harley must have noticed this as well though, or gotten some customer feedback, because this new 2025 version gets 60% more travel at both ends, and they say they've done that without affecting the super low seat height of 765mm. So yeah, sounds very good to me. It's like a very needed improvement. The only thing that's a little bit of a shame is that they got rid of some of those bronze engine covers, which really did give it a bit of a distinctive look. They're black now, which looks a bit more generic, but still overall I'd say it's a really interesting looking bike. So what do you think? Have Harley nailed it with their new 2025 lineup, or could they have done more to keep it fresh? Personally, didn't really see that ST version of the Pan America coming. That was a bit of a surprise, but I'd love to know what you think again down in the comments.